you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me one quick favor, see that little black subscribe button on the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, hit that little black subscribe button. Really does help this channel grow, my audience grow, and I appreciate it more than you know. Also, quick thank you to our presenting sponsor, Betfred Sportsbook and the Betfred Sportsbook app. Bet $50 on any game. Get up to $1,111 in free bets courtesy of the Betfred Sportsbook. Thank you again. Now, here's the video that you came here for. Now is in Miami with the Texas A&M and Miami game. And a lot like Texas, Alabama, both programs kind of with a lot to prove, both coming off disappointing seasons. But for Miami, it's only year 2 of the Mario Cristobal era. He's going to figure it out. It's just going to take some time. But for Texas A&M, this was kind of a big one, right? Last year, you go 5-7. The offense is a disaster. You finally figure it out in your final regular season game. Then you add Bobby Petrino as your offensive coordinator. And so if you listen to the shows last week, we talked a lot about this. We said, like, what if this actually works with Texas A&M? All the pieces are there. All the talent is there. Everything that you need to win. But Jimbo Fisher, it's the play calling. The offense isn't good. Then they put up 52 points against New Mexico. And I said, we spent all offseason talking about the possibility that it doesn't work. What if it does? Well, as it turns out, that was an overreaction to week 1 because Texas A&M not only lost to Miami on Saturday in Miami, they got boat raced. Final score 48-33. And I'll be blunt. The game wasn't even as close as that score would indicate, as how about this? Texas A&M was basically gifted their first 14 points, scored the first touchdown off a blocked punt, scored the second touchdown off of a muffed Miami punt. And it was actually a lot worse than the final score would indicate. And so listen, it's only week 2. You don't want to overreact, but that thermometer on Jimbo Fisher's seat, I'm doing a little thermometer turn up on YouTube here. It got turned up quite a bit for Jimbo Fisher. Now, in terms of the game, listen, I think if you're an Aggie fan, there's so many reasons to be frustrated, and I'll just list a few. I don't mean to be crass here. I'm just being serious. Where I would be frustrated is a couple things. One, I think the first frustrating part is that it was Miami. And that is not a disrespect on Miami. It's not they're this, they're that, they're the other thing. It's that, as I said a moment ago, this is year 2 of the Mario Cristobal era. And I get that Miami has access to the portal just like everybody else. I get that they had a top 10 recruiting class last year. And I get Mario Cristobal's a good coach. He's going to figure it out. But it is still only year 2, and they were kind of a mess last year. They went 5-7, but beyond going 5-7, they got blown out and destroyed in a lot of those games. Mentioned it the other day. Of their 7 losses, 5 of them were by double figures, were by 10+ points. Most of their games in their losses last year were not even close. And so for Mario Cristobal in year 2 to dominate Jimbo Fisher in year 6 with all Jimbo Fisher's recruits and all his guys and all his systems in place, that is a really, really, really bad sign. You know what else is not only a bad sign, but like just an absurdly frustrating one if you're an Aggie fan? The offense didn't let you down. It was the defense. And that's the part. It's like Texas A&M fans, they just like, they can't catch a break, right? For years, we've been, is Jimbo right? Is Jimbo wrong? Should he be calling plays? Should he not? Last year, we decided that he can't call plays anymore. He's incapable of being a head coach at this level in this era and also calling plays. And so the offseason narrative since forget December, since like last October, when they lost to App State, when they barely survived Miami at home and Arkansas on that neutral field, the conversation was like, he's got to give up play calling because they got to fix the offense. Well, the scary part is the offense is fixed. They're averaging over 40 points a game through 2 games. The offense, to its credit, wasn't great, but it wasn't terrible. It wasn't the reason that they lost. It was the defense. The defense couldn't stop anybody or anything, specifically Tyler Van Dyke. Tyler Van Dyke, the Miami quarterback, by the way, shout out Connecticut kid, neither here nor there, but I'm a CT guy. We got to stay together. 5 touchdowns, throwing the ball all over the field. And again, it goes back to what I said a minute ago. Miami's got dudes. Miami's got difference makers. But if you can't beat Miami, what are you going to do against some of the other teams that you're going to have to face throughout the year? And I think the last thing that was frustrating is I think a lot of the negativity from last year creeped back in. listen, last year, what was the conversation? It wasn't just wins and losses. It was the culture. It was the guys in the locker room. It was guys doing stuff that they shouldn't do. And the offseason narrative was we got rid of a lot of those guys. Now, I'm not saying anybody on Texas A&M is a bad person or a bad human or a bad this or a bad that, but I saw a lot of dudes quit on Saturday afternoon in Miami. I saw some plays late in that game where a tackle could have been made and you took a bad angle, or a tackle could have been made if you wrapped up and you tried to throw a shoulder and the guy bounced off of it and ran another 40 yards for a touchdown. I saw a lot of those little tiny slip things that the great programs don't do, right? We just talked about Alabama for a while. Alabama lost, but I thought they were fundamentally sound. I thought they were better prepared than they looked last year. Georgia doesn't make the small mistakes. Michigan doesn't make the small mistakes. Texas, at least last night, doesn't make the small mistakes. Texas A&M did the little stuff, the stuff between winning and losing, the stuff between being 6-6 and 9-3. That is the difference. And so because of it, I know it feels early to have the Jimbo Fisher conversation, and it just might be. Like, it might be a little too early to talk Jimbo Fisher, but in a lot of ways it's not. $90 million guaranteed extension a few years ago, went 5-7 last year, and we all agreed he had the hottest seat in college football coming into 2023. And so I don't think it's too early. And I think the question becomes, like, what is his future? What has to happen? What is the ceiling and what is the floor for him keeping this job? Now, the good thing for Jimbo Fisher, that's a lot of money they're going to have to pay him. The buyout on this contract is absurd. The buyout on this contract is still, even after this year, if he survives till the end, $75 million guaranteed. That is just an absurd amount of money. And I know that Texas A&M people think, oh, well, they got the money. They'll figure it out. You understand how much money it's going to cost to get rid of Jimbo Fisher after this year? $75 million plus assistant coaches. Some of them are on multi-year contracts. Plus, you got to pay a new coach probably $8 to $10 million a year. And then, oh, by the way, you got to pay his assistant coaches. It's a lot of money. Plus, they're doing like $200 million in facility upgrades. And so Jimbo Fisher, his only saving grace, it might be a little bit of the John Calipari effect at Kentucky, is like, eventually there's only so much money to go around. And so because of it, I think he's probably going to be okay if the floor doesn't absolutely fall out. What is the floor falling out? Well, they went 5-7 last year. You go 5-7, you're done. I think 6-6, you're probably done. I think 7-5 is where you start to get to that gray area where you can say, look, 2-game win improvement. Keep me around for one more year to coach that 2022 recruiting class as juniors. I don't know that 7-5 will save you. I do think 8-4 will. But it is fascinating, right? It is fascinating that we're talking about $75 million that he would still be owed after this season. And so I think A&M and their administration and their boosters are praying that he can somehow get to 8-4. Now, the saving grace if you're Texas A&M, and by the way, I'm not sitting here promising they're going to go 8-4. I tried to promise you that things were improved, that things were better, that things are different, that things are this, that things are that. But at the same time, I will say this. The good news is SEC West is kind of weird right now, right? Alabama doesn't have a quarterback as of right now. We just talked about it. What else? LSU didn't look very good against Florida State. Auburn, you get at home. Arkansas, you get on a neutral field. And so Ole Miss, you got to go to Ole Miss. Well, you got to win at some point somewhere on the road. So the good news is the SEC doesn't feel that overwhelming. You do have a road game at Tennessee and a cross-division game. You get South Carolina at home. But, man, you got to turn things around in a hurry. Now, the good news is, like I said, schedule is pretty manageable going forward. The next 4, no true road games. Next 4, Louisiana Monroe at home. 2 weeks from now, you get Auburn at home. You got to win that one. And I like Hugh Freeze, but you got to win that one. Then you get Arkansas and Dallas, Alabama at home, at Tennessee before the bye. I know Bama's, whatever. But, man, you got to go like 3-1 during that stretch. You cannot lose to Auburn at home. Jimbo Fisher, man, I tried to believe. I tried to trust. I tried to say that Bobby Petrino was the difference. And I was made to look stupid yet again.